Sharon Tsengera from GZU. Mr. Nyamtoa, have you identified Sharon or Fortune?
Yes, she can unmute by herself.
Okay. Sharon, kindly go ahead.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay. Thank you so much for giving me such an opportunity. Well, last time we touched on, like, Mrs. Tanya used an example of pens. So if you are an entrepreneur and you want to, you'll be probably selling the same product that everyone is selling out there. So you have to devise ways to market your product. So that's what I learned, and also to be open-minded, like to share your ideas so that they can be developed. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so we're going to keep going. So some of the things that we learned last week is we touched on what is an entrepreneur. Is it someone who just sells stuff? You know, am I an entrepreneur if I buy and sell? Am I an entrepreneur just because I've innovated and created a technology that didn't exist before? And like Jeffrey said in the chat box, entrepreneurship is far more than that, right? It is about building an entire ecosystem around the product or service that you are selling or delivering to your customer, okay? So what we're gonna do today is we're going to start off from the point of, what do I even sell? So I know some of you have amazing ideas as to something that you would do if you were to start your own business, but today we're gonna go back a little bit and start from the point of those who are wondering, okay, if I were to build a business, where would I even start? So remember I said that to be an entrepreneur, you don't exactly have to create something that didn't exist before. Like we just heard, I gave the example last week of just a pen, and we saw how many amazing different ideas or businesses came out of just a pen. And so you don't have to create something new from scratch, but today is part of today's session, we're going to be touching on some stuff that looks at principles of, how do I even build something if my idea is to build something from scratch, okay? So I know some of you have volunteered for our practical part and your hands have already been lowered, which makes it a little bit difficult because now I cannot remember everyone who had their hand raised. So I know this is a little bit of admin, but if that was you, please can you raise your hand again? I can see someone called Mirirai has already wrote in the chat box that they volunteer. So if you meet the criteria, you are now our candidate number 3. We are looking for 1 or 2 more people. So if you're someone who would like to be part of the exercise, please do so. Please make sure that you take, I'm a big believer in you taking your own notes because that's a great way of learning. So in my slides, I tend not to put too much because I want you to be able to frame your own content around some of the things that we're touching on today. So we've already selected 3. We've got Shingai, we've got Tashinga, we've got Mirirai. So we're looking for 1 or 2 more people. Okay, so moving on ahead with that. Last week we also touched on, we saw a pitch, how do you pitch your business, etc. And we said that we will look into that. I don't know who of you have reached out to the Y&D ambassadors to volunteer yourself as someone who's going to pitch in our last entrepreneurship session. But I encourage you to do so if you have not already done so. Okay. Okay, so as we move on, last week we looked at this. It's not about ideas, it's about making your ideas happen. So I'm going to skip over to the slides that we're looking at today. I don't want to, give hints and skip over some other slides that we're going to be looking at later. Okay, so there's a concept that we call human-centered design or design thinking. So wherever you are, say to yourself, human-centered design. I like to use the term design thinking. It just sounds cooler. But if you remember it as human-centered design, then literally in a second, you will remember what it's all about. So it's called human-centered design. So write the word human, put a hyphen in there. A hyphen is the dash, and then centered, and then space design. What is human-centered design? Well, human-centered design is a concept that allows us to build solutions that target the people for which it is intended for. From an entrepreneur's perspective, you can come up with the most amazing product, but if there's nobody who wants to use it, unfortunately, it goes to naught. It's like imagine if I arrived in Bulawayo today and built a massive garage, right? And as people, Zimbabwe, one of the greatest marketing tools in Zimbabwe, I hear, is Makua Network. And Makua Network would be speculating what business is going to be there. People would be like, maybe it's a car garage, maybe they're manufacturing toothpaste, I don't know. And then what if one day, I put a red ribbon outside and I invite you all to the opening and I cut the ribbon and I'm selling airplanes. How many airplanes in Bulawayo do you think I'd be able to sell? Can we see some examples in the chat box? How many airplanes? Within the space of 6 months, if I opened this factory by July, how many airplanes would I be able to sell? Probably none, zero, none, exactly. So it is one thing to come up with an amazing idea, but it's another thing to not have what we call a market for it. So that's the terminology we use. So if you ever heard someone say, there is no market for such and such in Zimbabwe, it means that there is no group of people who would be willing to buy your product in that particular place. Okay, so human-centered design from a business perspective means that I'm going to save myself a lot of time and a lot of heartache because I'm creating a product that I know people want. Imagine if I opened, a bread factory. Okay, I know there's plenty of bread factories, but I know I'm going to get at least 10 customers. So human-centered design is a concept that was created in a place that we call Silicon Valley. Now, does anyone know how Silicon Valley is? Does anyone even know if Silicon Valley is a real place or if it's I'm sure there's some people who believe Silicon Valley is a fictitious place, like Genovia or, what's the name of the country in Game of Thrones? I don't know. So Silicon Valley, I'm seeing, okay, there's nothing yet in the chat box. So basically, yeah, it's in San Francisco. So Silicon Valley is just outside of San Francisco. It's in California, yeah? It is in a place, it's in Palo Alto. Let's just be honest, it's in Palo Alto. But like, it's big, right? As in like, there's an area called Silicon Valley. And Silicon Valley happens to be the place where Facebook, Google, Twitter, all those like incredible tech companies that were created from zero came from, right? So human-centered design basically has allowed, and it's also used with another business concept called the lean startup model, okay? And it was designed to really like, you save money. So imagine if I discovered after 6 months, after now in December, when I'm sitting here with my factory and I still have, airplanes and I'm inviting all of you, come and see the airplanes. Are you sure you don't want to buy? Imagine discovering only in December that nobody's going to buy it. I've wasted money. I built a whole factory. I brought in the airplanes. Like, it's just all this, like, what am I going to do? How am I going to get my money back? What am I going to do with the airplanes? So it just cuts out you having to spend money on something when there is no market for it. So some of you who want to be entrepreneurs, don't go out and buy a suitcase of skirts, from China and think, no, it's the new fashion. They're all gonna love it. There are certain things that we do when we're building business that allow us to avoid those kinds of mistakes. And by mistakes, I mean it's a sunk cost. Now, if those of you are taking notes, a sunk cost means I've spent the money already. It means that whether someone buys stuff or not, I've already spent the money, so it's not coming back.